Good afternoon. My name is David Lamb, and I want to welcome you to the Healthy Soil Farmer Showcase. This week's discussion will be soil health in Arkansas. Is it profitable? I've been involved with soil health as a project manager here with the Soil Health Institute and formerly with the Natural Resources Conservation Service for a long time, over 40 years. And the question is, people always look at the cost of implementing some of these soil health activities and practices. And today we're going to explore, is it making folks money? Is it not? And how you kind of look at that or can evaluate that. I want to give a little introduction. The Healthy Soils for Sustainable Cotton Showcase is part of the Healthy Soils for Sustainable Cotton Project. It's a joint partnership between the Soil Health Institute and a partnership with Wrangler Jeans and the Walmart Foundation, and I serve as the project manager. A lot of you may not know who the Soil Health Institute is. We are a not-for-profit group that was started about 5 or 6 years ago with a mission in mind to safeguard and enhance vitality and productivity of soil through scientific research and advancement. And the idea there is, many years folks have always said, where's the science behind soil health? Well, there's a lot of supporting science out there, a lot of papers. Unfortunately, when you Google or do something on soil health, you may not get what you're looking for, but things related to cover crops, no-till, and those kinds of things. There's just a lot of information out there, and then what the Soil Health Institute is trying to help gather that along with new information out there. Of course, it's always nice to have funding to support projects like this, and this webinar, along with some other soil health activity, training activities, is generously supported by funding from the Wrangler Corporation and Walmart Foundation, and we appreciate the funding for that. The Healthy Soils for Sustainable Cotton Project started about 3 years ago, and with two goals in mind. One, we wanted to increase the adoption of soil health management systems by cotton producers. We were going to try and do that through some intensive field day training workshops, identifying farmer mentors that producers can interact with, identify soil health technical specialists, which we had done in the 6 states we were involved with, Arkansas being one of them. But then we had to kind of take a step back with the COVID-19 when it hit last year. We had to shut down all our in-person training, and we were going to the more virtual training base like we're having today, which really, when you think about it, folks, is not too bad. I guess it's like 21 degrees there in Arkansas. So instead of being in somebody's old drafty tool shed with a space heater back in the corner and everybody wearing coveralls trying to stay warm, hopefully you're all sitting inside with a nice warm cup of coffee in your favorite chair, and you'll be able to listen to some really good expertise on the topic of soil health. The other key objective is to quantify the production, or what are those environmental benefits that are being derived through the implementation of these systems out there. This is the third one in the series of 8, the third showcase. We heard from Mississippi a couple of weeks ago. Sledge Taylor was the producer we had there. He talked about what works, what doesn't work for him there in the Mississippi Delta region. Last week, we heard a lot of good discussion from some Texas AgriLife researchers on some of their long-term study sites. But we also heard from 6 really dynamic producers who are making soil health work in a very tough environment. I never worked west of the Mississippi in dry climates, and to hear these guys talk and what they're doing is pretty amazing. Both of those will be available for replay, as will this one once it's been completed. We are recording this. Should be available for replay next week. You can see the other topics that are coming up. One thing I will say about the replay is, since you've registered for this event, you will receive an email letting you know, and I'll have the link. I'll take you to the replays if you want to, if you missed one, or you want to go back and catch up with the folks from Mississippi, or if you missed one of the future ones there. Soil health, I like to set the stage for what these gentlemen are going to be talking about. It's the idea of soil having the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. It's a living ecosystem. It's not just a collection of sand, silt, and clay particles that are inert. There's life in the soil. We're talking about sustainability. We're talking about regenerating the soil's capacity to do that. And introducing it, or trying to expand on this idea that soil's got a role in agriculture beyond just supporting the equipment that goes across the field. there are certain functions that soil needs to do in order for cotton to be raised or corn or whatever crop it is. And these soil functions are cycle nutrients. They're the soil's a very key component of water, you know, whether it infiltrates and then we like it to soak in, fill up the soil profile, and then give it back up come those crucial times in June, July, and August when you're trying to grow your cash crop. We expect our soil to filter and buffer out pollutants that we apply, what breaks down those chemicals and those types of products. That happens through bioremediation, if you will. The key here, physical stability. Got to be able to harvest the crop. If you run up the field every time you try and go after your cotton, you're always going to have problems like that. And that's the one that really comes back the quickest. Once you start to implement some of these activities that the gang will talk about here in a minute, you'll notice that physical stability, be able to cut across the field, get on the field a lot sooner than you used to be. And the idea for soil being a habitat for biodiversity, you know, you got microbes, you got earthworms, you got pill bugs, you got all sorts of organisms out there that play a key role in cycling nutrients, water infiltration, and buffering and filtering out pollutants and those types of things. 90% of those soil functions that are necessary to produce food and fiber in this country are mediated by those soil organisms that are growing and become more robust as the healthy soils start to take over. And this is my last slide here, the idea of the soil health principles that we've been harping on for the last 4 or 5 years. Really, you want to minimize disturbance and maximize cover. Why? Because it protects the soil, it creates that habitat, provides a food source, provides increased opportunity for organic matter to be produced. And then also, when you maximize the living roots and diversity, you provide a continuous carbon source, you provide a food source, and those are key principles. And as you hear our speakers today, listen for those principles and the activities as they discuss the activities in their soil health management system. And finally, if you want to ask a question, unfortunately, we can't have open phone lines, but you can type in a Q&A at the bottom. You just click on the box and you can type it in, and Matt and Bill will be looking at those as we go out throughout the session. And don't hesitate to challenge our speakers and go from there. So with that, I'm going to introduce Matt Flye and Bill Robertson. They're both with the University of Arkansas. And I'm going to let them explain their pedigrees to themselves because they'll probably do a better job than I will. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Matt and Bill.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. I'm Matt Flye, soils instructor for University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. And I do a lot of demonstrations, on-farm demonstrations, looking at soil health and cover crops across the Arkansas Delta. Collaborate a lot with Dr. Bill Robertson. Really, I kind of picked up some of the things that he got started a couple years before I started in this position. And Bill, would you like to introduce yourself and just kind of explain a little bit about some of the details of what you do?
Yes, I would. Thanks. Thank you, Matt. I'm the cotton extension agronomist with Arkansas. I've been in Arkansas since 1995. I grew up on the Southern High Plains, and I've worked some with the National Cotton Council. In fact, our first speaker, Sledge Taylor, I've met him through the National Cotton Council, and Barry Evans in Texas. And I really enjoyed Sledge's presentation the first week, and then Barry and the other growers the second week of this, and proud to have some really good producers to talk about their challenges this week, because that's always been my favorite part. But the soil health, I figured, you know, when I moved to Arkansas, the soils in Arkansas were so different than the soils on the Southern High Plains where I grew up. But my work with the National Cotton Council, when we started looking at sustainability, some of the things that the supply chain want, is really where my interest got involved into improving soil health, because the things that we do to improve soil health improve our sustainability. And doing work with Cotton Incorporated, BCI, we do a lot of partnership things. Matt, you and I, and everybody on here, the producers, we do in cooperation with USDA, NRCS. So we have, and Arkansas State University, we have quite a partnership here in Arkansas. So really, this is part of our overall program to improve soil health. But the bottom line is, you know, our supply chain needs documented sustainable cotton, and I think that's where we need to go. And so, Matt, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I work with Adam, Wes, and Jesse. All three of these guys are cotton farmers here in Arkansas. They do soil health practices and cover crops in different ways, and they're really some drivers in what we're doing in extension and university research. And so without them, we probably wouldn't be where we are today. And so I'll just start out. Let Adam, could you describe your farm operation and just kind of elaborate on your immediate family, and then I'll move on to the next farmer on my screen.
Sure. I'm Adam Chappell. I farm with my brother Seth. My dad is still active on the farm, but he retired officially in 14, but he's still around keeping us in line, I guess you'd say. But we farm about 7,800 acres, cotton, corn, soybeans, rice, some small grains in the winter, and have recently started integrating livestock back on the farm. So soil health practices, we started out trying to fight pigweed and have evolved into a full tilt system. So it's taken us from the brink of bankruptcy to, a profitable farm. So it's literally saved our farm.
Thanks, Adam. Wes, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Wes Kirkpatrick. My wife and I farm together in Southeast Arkansas. We farm just over 4,000 acres, mixture of cotton, soybeans, and corn. My father-in-law, he retired a little over a year ago, and we took over the operation from him. But we've been growing cover crops on parts of our farm for probably about, this year is our 7th or 8th season that we've grown cover crops. My wife and I, we have 2 kids. One is almost 16, and then we have our son's almost 16, and our daughter will be 13 this summer.
All right, thanks, Wes. Jesse, you're next.
All right. Yeah, my name's Jesse Flye. I guess I'm kind of the new kid on the block on this cover crop thing. I've been, I farm with my dad, Marty White, and my brother, Logan White. And we farm about 15,000 acres in Northeast Arkansas. Our farm consists of some real sandy soils where we farm cotton, corn, and peanuts on. And then we have some heavier dirt where we farm rice and beans. And so our farm's kind of split up into 2 different operations. And cover crop has been something that's been interesting to us for the last 4 years on the sandier soils. We're still trying to figure it out, and I'm probably going to listen more than I am talk here because I know Adam does some things that really blows my mind. So I'm ready to hear what he says today and hopefully learn more than I give. But it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Jesse. Again, guys, I just want to thank you for joining us today. Thanks for being willing to share your experiences with us and just kind of develop this roundtable discussion. Y'all are driving the ship here. I'll ask some questions to facilitate conversation, but if any of you have questions for each other, I mean, just ask each other. Don't kind of wait on me. So, but to start out, I'll ask, why did you get into cover crops? Was it a big problem that you're trying to solve? Typically that's what I've experienced when I deal with producers and try to work with them. They have a problem they're trying to fix by implementing cover crops or no-till. So whoever wants to go first can go ahead. What got you into cover crops?
I mean, like Adam, I think he hit the nail on the head for us. It was fighting pigweed. That's kind of what we were looking at. There were some other artillery motives such as moisture management and keeping our soil intact and not blown away from us. But the number one enemy is pigweed right now. And we found that cover crop has definitely helped us keep those in check more so than non-cover crop.
I'll speak on kind of what my take on our cover crop is. I know it does provide us some pigweed management, help with pigweed management, but we're not able to rely on cover crop completely for that. My main focus on cover crops is we have areas where we have limited well water or surface water for that matter, irrigation water. And it seems like the cover crops have helped us be able to utilize what little water we might have to irrigate, because we can't really make a crop without being able to irrigate our crop. And we're short on water in different parts of the farm, it helps us utilize what rainfall we get and be able to spread what irrigation water we have available to us across those acres a little more efficiently. We don't have a lot of non-irrigated land, but what land we do that's non-irrigated, it's almost we won't plant it with a cash crop if we don't have a cover crop on it, is the way I look at it. We've done, well, for an example, on a soybean farm, we went from maybe cutting 10 bushels on years when it was drought the year to consistently, regardless of the year, been able to cut 40 or 45 bushel soybeans on it. So we utilize them more so for our moisture management.
Yeah, and again, I got into it because of pigweed. Started in 2009. That weed was single-handedly breaking us. We were primarily cotton in and just could not make a profit with the cost of seed and everything we were doing to control weeds. So we started experimenting with cereal rye and have since found so many other benefits that it doesn't make sense to me at all to even consider farming the way we used to. It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, we just like Wes, we can't rely solely on cover crop for pigweed control, but it's a real good supplement. I mean, it really holds them down and lets us stay on top of them, where before it was just, every 7 days we were applying something to try to kill the ones that were up or keep more from coming up. And it was just a treadmill of spending money we had a hard time getting off of. So that's why we started.
Well, what about how have y'all evolved in use of covers and no-till? Kind of where you started out versus where you are today. Could y'all kind of give us a learning history of where y'all have been on your farm?
So, yeah, I'll start it, I guess, since I kind of started the first one. We really have not branched out. We started cereal rye 4 years ago and have still stayed with just cereal rye. I'm struggling with kind of where to go next. I'm doing some things with Bill and Adam now on a 40-acre block that'll hopefully kind of give me some guidance on how to take it to the next step. But we haven't branched out and done anything more than cereal rye at the moment.
For us, we've been on a minimum, what we call minimum till system for quite a long time, and we just incorporated cover crop into that. And we've got some fields that have not been disked in probably 20 years, I would say, that we just rehip on the old bed, and by incorporating cover crops into those fields, we're a lot of times we've planted our cereal rye cover crop just right on top of the old bed and not even touched the ground with any type of implement in the fall after harvest. But sometimes, even over time, those beds will melt down. And the way we irrigate, we furrow irrigate, so we have to have a middle to water down. So, over every so often we will have to come back and refresh those beds, but we haven't disked them down. And the cover crops have allowed us to extend that time between when we're having to refresh those beds. Of course, we don't plant cover crop on every acre. That just doesn't work for us on every acre, but where we do, it's helped us minimize our tillage, our trips across the field too.
Yeah, so for us, our goal is to get every acre planted in the fall. We have only achieved that one time just because of weather, but since we started in planting them in 2009, we started with 300 acres, and that original 300 acres has only had one tillage event since then, and that was because of fall of 18, how wet it was. We just completely destroyed the farm trying to get the crop off because it just never quit raining. Even with our improved soil structure, we still made ruts because there was water standing everywhere. So, but those fields prior to the tillage event, you could just run your hand in the ground like you were, digging in a raised garden bed or something. And immediately following that tillage event, they were hard again. So that's how much damage we did with one repair of the farm from ruts. So we try to never touch it with anything. We furrow irrigate also, but we just try to clean out the middles with a little furrow runner, I guess you call it. It's one that we built. We just we try to build our own stuff if we can. And so that's the only tillage that our farm sees, you know, unless it's damage from a fall like 18 or a landowner's wanting to do some leveling or some other kind of, you know, improvement like that requires us to till. But if we can not touch it ever again, that would be fine with me.
Matt, if I could ask a couple of questions, we've had some questions come
Sure.
in, and I think this is a really good place to put those. And one has to do with what species of cover crop do you find best?
I think Bill froze up there. So what I think the question is, what are the most effective cover crops that you see work best for weed suppression? One lady asked, is cereal rye the best? And another one asked, do you use buckwheat?
Well, if you're, you know, buckwheat's a summer plant. So if you're trying to suppress weeds ahead of winter wheat or something like that, then it may be okay. It's a broadleaf, but in my experience, grasses have been the best at suppressing weeds, more so than anything else. If you give them time and space, they tiller out and just blanket the ground. And that could be cereal rye or oats or barley or just, you know, whatever grows best on your soil. But grasses have been the best for us by far.
Yeah, we found the same as well. We stick with cereal rye, and there's a couple of reasons there. Not only does it cover best, but with cotton being a broadleaf, I don't want to plant the same cover crop as the plant I'm trying to raise. So cotton and soybeans typically, you know, from what I've been told, need to be a grass cover crop.
Same here. We've been sticking with just a grass cover crop, and so far it's been cereal rye. You know, I would like to try some blends, but how we plant, I'm not sure how. You know, we don't drill it. We broadcast it with a 3-point hitch coon type spreader, and I'm not sure how effectively you could spread multiple seed size covers. Yeah, but it's something I'd like to look at and try and see what we can do. Maybe just try a partial field or something with a blend and see if we can actually even get a uniform stand of whatever we're trying to plant. But for up till now, all we've planted has been cereal rye.
Yeah, we flew on a blend this fall, and I think, you know, we got a pretty good uniform stand. The vetch was kind of hard to see. I don't know, Bill, what was that, a month ago when we looked at it?
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see, you know, if we did get we did 50 pounds of cereal rye and 1.5 pounds of vetch flown on in between 2 defoliation shots.
I'd like to hear how that goes, because I'd like to try some of those blends this fall. Just, you know, if they can do it with an airplane, I don't see why we won't be able to do it with our spreader broadcast.
Yeah, the biggest thing with spreading is seed size and density. So, you know, some that spread good together are vetch and cereal rye and radish. Those all spread good together. Winter peas spread good. Oats don't spread that good. They're too light, and, you know, they got too much surface area, so they don't fly through the air very good. So little small seeded stuff like some of your mustards and annual ryes, they don't spread very well, but there's blends you can definitely spread and get good stand. And that 1.5 pound vetch may not have looked like much a month ago, but I'm telling you, it's fixing to look like a lot.
But, you know, to kind of follow it, you know, I had a question come up on how much do you seed? I know all 3 of you talked to, you know, the cost of the cover crop is kind of your one of your big goals in determining what you're going to plant and how much. But there was a question on rates. I think some of y'all talked about rates. But then when we have this, depending on how much biomass you have, what planter modifications have you made, and are there changes that you have to make when you get into this, and especially based on your termination strategy?
We have not done anything different to our planters besides making sure your culture blades are sharp. But I mean, we haven't done anything. The same planter that I'm running my cover crop is the same planter 5 years ago I was basically running in our conventional tillage stuff.
Do you run a coulter in front of your planter?
No, do not.
Okay.
Same with us. We haven't made any modifications to our planting system. We do prefer to have the cover standing while we plant into it and then start trying to get it to go down, because it's a whole lot easier to plant into it while it's standing up than planting through a thick mat of stuff laying on the ground.
Yeah, we hadn't modified ours at all. Just sharp disc openers. That's the biggest thing. And on the plant while it's standing, it is easier if it's standing. It's easier to me when it's green. But if it does get too tall and fibrous, we lay ours down with a flat roller, one we used to bust clods with in rice fields. So we lay it flat and plant the same direction as the roller, and it's like running a comb through hair that's not tangled. It just plants good. So if you do have to get into lots of biomass situation and you need to get it on the ground, lay it down flat and plant the same direction you roll it, and you pretty well got it whooped.
I actually have a question, Wes. You said it earlier, but we're struggling with keeping our rows where we can keep our planter on top of them after 3 or 4 years of cover crop. And I don't know if maybe it's because of the structure of our rows going into it, if they're too tall or what it is. But I mean, we're getting, like I said, I just had to repull rows on a farm that I didn't want to ever touch again. I did. I mean, this was the 4th year and they were just so pointy. I couldn't get the planter to stay on top of the row. We had stand count issues because of that. What have y'all done to battle that?
Well, it sounds like y'all probably have a lot sandier soils than what we have. And that's probably part of it. But for us, if we re-hip a field and plant a cover crop, we won't plant the cover crop until we do all the top of the bed down flat. So that we got the bed how we want to plant on it in the fall. We got the bed how we want it to be, so that we can plant on it in the spring with a cover crop on it. So but I think probably the issue, y'all sound like your sandier ground is maybe the issue that you've got. Because ours too, we don't have a lot of what they call beach sand. I mean, a lot of people call it sands here, but it's more of a silt loam or a silty clay loam. And so the soil structure and the soil type is somewhat more resistant to the bed eroding away over the winter. So probably the biggest issue is soil type difference is what I would guess.
And we actually went away from tall beds and just plant flat and then pull those furrows through the flat ground. So we don't actually have a raised bed anymore to deal with. So that eliminated that problem. We would run into that occasionally, but we just did away with the beds. So now we're back on flat ground with just a good middle to run water down. So.
And your internal drainage is now good enough where you don't have to worry about the wet feed, I guess, that we typically really the rows accomplish.
Yeah, the fur runner and moving away from the beds, the fur runner came about because we couldn't push water out of our middles anymore, as our infiltration rates got to the point where I couldn't get water to come out the bottom of the fields anymore. So I had to actually disturb the middle to make water move to the bottom. I couldn't pump enough to get to the bottom anymore. So when we figured out we had infiltration rates like that, when that 18 event happened, we just decided to go flat. And if it backed them up a couple of years, we just had to deal with it. And it did. It slowed them down, but they're back to about where they were now. They're before now, I believe, because we don't have near the ponding and stuff we used to, prior to starting cover crops.
Bill, we got any more questions here? I think, one's talking about managing covers on beds and how you terminate. Do y'all have any differences in termination? Y'all could share a little bit of that.
Well, for us, we terminate, we're just like sticking with the grass, and we haven't had any issue with glyphosate terminating our crop. We learned, I think the hard way, or I did, that if you want to get, if you to get the total or the best benefit out of your cover, you want that cover to be on the ground at some point early. The earlier the better after you plant in the crop, for a couple reasons. That laying on the ground is covering more of the soil for weed control and helping and shading the soil. And for cotton, if that cotton's growing up into a standing cover, it's shooting for the sky. So it gets really spindly really quick. And, if you've got the cover laid down, and I'm getting around to the point I'm making is we terminate with Roundup or glyphosate, and then before the crop comes up, we'll spray paraquat to go ahead and start breaking up the cell walls to get that cover to start laying on down, so that it's on the ground or close to the ground when the crop is coming up.
That's the same program we use, Roundup, and then followed by Gramoxone and Prees. Whenever we're killing everything at planting. This year in our cotton, we're going to do a kind of a version of strip till, but no tillage. It's just going to be a chemical strip where we're going to plant the cotton, band it out. And we're going to leave the middles growing for a while longer because we're going to go back to conventional cotton, UA 222. So we're going to leave the middles growing for as long as we can, probably have an 8-inch band where we're going to plant the cotton and band on a pretty good, break. Pretty expensive if you broadcast, but banding's not too bad. So we'll come back and kill the middles later with all select, or if we need a broad spectrum, we'll use our hoods and knock them down. But we're going to try to leave them going as long as we can for weed control in that conventional cotton.
Adam, now when you talk about middles, your middles are a lot different than a lot of other folks. Talk about your row spacing. And then there was a question earlier on when, the Forerunner plow. I described that because if we run just a regular sweep down something like that, we'd have a hay rake. And so, with the Forerunner, like you talked about, we do not have a hay rake, but talk about that a little bit and then talk about your row spacing.
Yeah. So for cotton, we're on 76-inch rows now. That's something we picked up from those Australians that I work with. Those are some pretty innovative folks there. They operate with no safety net like we do, with the subsidized crop insurance and payments and all that. So they got to sink or swim over there. And that wide row, low population cotton just really made sense to me. But the 76-inch row, we started with it with traded cotton just to have something to spray over the top in case we ran into a problem. But we're confident enough in our weed control program that we can, if our covers are good, we can do it with conventional cotton now. And some of the best cotton I've made in the last 5 years was U of A 222. So that's what we're going to put that one in the 76-inch setup and try to manage it a little differently than just, over the top sprays. We're going to do a lot of banding and a lot of directed stuff under the hood. So the Forerunner is just two basically oversized disc openers that run together like a planter does, double disc opener planter, and then behind that we put a between 4 and 7-inch sweep depending on what we're going for. But you can run the sweep behind that double disc opener because it kind of clears all the stuff that would rake up on it. But that makes a really nice deep trench to run water down. Minimal disturbance, doesn't throw dirt all over the place. It just kind of makes a path, and then you'll have a little berm right on the edge there, but it's not, after your first irrigation event, it's pretty well gone. So it's a pretty nice tool.
Adam, I kind of hate to keep picking on you, but we got some questions in that kind of fit toward you. But Jesse and Wes, I think they'll fit for y'all some too, and I'd like to hear your comments. But Adam, you talked about conventional cotton, and I don't know that, that everybody really knows what you're talking about on conventional cotton as far as the technology that it has. And then if you're growing cotton with no herbicide or insect traits, what about insect problems just because of that cotton? And then even for Wes and Jesse, what do you feel like you've seen different insect pressures because of cover crops? Are they worse, they better, or what are you seeing?
Well, yeah, the conventional cotton doesn't have any tech in it at all. It's just, it's what they had before Roundup Ready and BT. So seed cost on it is nothing. And at the populations I'm growing, it's like $4 an acre for seed. So that's pretty economical. But as far as the years I have grown U of A 222, I'm pretty sure Well, I know my plant bug sprays have been lower than the state average, and I had it 2 years in a row, and I sprayed worms twice both years. So I don't know how that would have stacked up in 15, 16 for state averages, but two worm sprays and plant bug sprays are always pretty low. And I think that's just because of the environment that we've created around the farm there. It's lots of predatory insects that don't normally make it through regular cotton production when you're spraying insecticide at planting and then every week from there on. So we just don't have the insect problems that we used to. And I'm assuming based on state averages that our neighbors are. So, you know, we've seen a major difference in that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen our plant bug pressure is actually less on our cover crop fields. Usually thrips is, somewhat of a concern most of the time on our conventional stuff. We found on the cover crop thrips, they can't find it. We just don't typically have the thrip pressure in there near as much. And then we spray 4 to 5 times a year on plant bugs average. Typically on the cover crop fields, we're about 1 spraying less than that is what we're finding on just the limited stuff we're doing.
I would echo the same thing. The thrips early season, it seems like it's kind of non-existent in the cover crop fields. The healthiest looking cotton we have on our farm when it comes up and starts growing is the cotton that's in the cover crop. And that's probably partly due to thrips not chewing on it and protection from wind and the environment too.
I've got one other question I'd like to kick out between y'all. Matt, keep jumping in, but
Oh yeah, take it.
But I know landlords and working with landlords. I know part of Arkansas is the trying to get land to farm is very, very competitive. And what are y'all seeing between landlords? You get much resistance from them, or are they primarily concerned on yield, or what? Describe your relationship with your landlords and what do they think about cover crops?
Yeah, I'm actually, I guess, somewhat blessed with a couple of landlords that have been helping. They actually have cost shared some of the cover crop costs, which has been a welcome sight. We farm the Judd Hill station. That farm is set up, kind of to try to experiment, work with y'all on the U of A side and figure things out. So the trustee there has really been forward with wanting cover crop and trying to figure out how to make it a production, something reliable on production. At the same time, we're all crop share. Everything on the farm is 75-25 rent for the most part. And so landowners are concerned that, yes, I may be saving money and lowering my ROI, or my ROI is my yield dropping, which would affect them. So I'm excited to do what we're doing, Bill, and we're going to do 40 acres of a true cover crop, kind of what Adam does, and 40 acres like what most Northeast Arkansas farms cotton at. And we'll see if we can still pay the landlord as much and hopefully help the producer out as well.
I haven't had any negative feedback from any of my landlords. They're anywhere from they don't care as long as we get their rent to them to they would like to see us try some. So, I know on a particular that farm I mentioned earlier where it was a non-irrigated farm or part of a farm where we increased our soybean yields. That particular landowner, he has some more fields that we do irrigate, and he wanted to try some of the cover crop on some of his irrigated ground too. So we've tried that. So I haven't had any negative comments about from any of my landlords about putting cover crop on their farm.
Yeah, the most negative probably comments when we first started were from other farmers around. Thought we were a little insane for planting into almost head high weeds. So but yeah, all of our landlords were very receptive.
Yeah, I've had farmers drive by, been running a planter or something out in that head high cover crop, and see a farmer drive by and turn around and drive back by and stop and get out and look at me like I'm crazy. But They don't ever say anything.
My dad was probably the biggest skeptic when we started. We had a 600-acre block right on the highway, and I said, just let me give it a try. And so we had cereal rye out there, and I didn't terminate any of it till probably the biggest chunk was 10 to 14 days before the planter ran through the field, and we left some that we planted in green, trying to kind of figure it out. And the stuff that we had sprayed in front of it, I took the planter up there and got it saying it was planting, and Dad come up there and, like I said, was not a fan of cover crops at that time, and dug around out in the soil after we made a pass or two. And he looked at me, he goes, I think this is going to work. And now he actually pushes sometimes further than what I'm comfortable to do. So it's changed, it's changed a lot of people's eyes around our part of the world, just from a little bit of stuff we've done.
I don't know what happened. I got blown off here. I don't know where we're at or what's going on.
But Adam, we're talking about, resistance from landlords and all that. And I know one of my favorite stories about your dad when he was planting cover with cover taller than the hood of the tractor. But talk about kind of what your brother and your dad think of some of your ideas sometimes.
Yeah, well, the landlord deal, I've got really good ones, and I try to communicate to them what I'm doing and actually show them, when they come visit, I try to take them around the farm and show them what we're doing. And so I actually don't have any resistance from any landlords. I think they're all really pleased with it. At least that's been my impression. But yeah, as far as what my brother and dad think about some of the stuff I come up with, they end up usually going with it, but it's Seth's the one that catches most of it now, because when I, like with the grazing thing, he just thought that was insane, when I first started talking about that. But after we did it a couple of years, it's pretty enjoyable. We actually don't have any cows on the farm this year, and that turned out to be good. We didn't get enough growth on our cover this fall to do anything. We'd be feeding like crazy right now. So our model works. If the cows aren't cheap and the growth isn't there, don't buy them. So that turned out to be a good thing this year. But anyway, yeah, Dad, we'd been doing covers for a couple of years, Bill, before that story, but that was the first year that they really kind of got away from us. We got a rainy spell there in spring, and I just refused to hire an airplane to burn them down. So we just let them go. And that was cereal rye, and it was slapping the hood of an 8330. I mean, it was up on the windows when he was planting, and he was irate because he was all about no-till and what we've been doing before. But that right there just blew his mind, and he was letting me know about it on the two-way. If anybody from FCC had been listening, we'd have lost our license that day, because he was not happy about that, man. He was all over me, but it ended up working great. I mean, that turned off to be a dry year, and that huge biomass just saved us a ton on irrigation, and we made a really good crop that year. So, he's, of course, he doesn't have any money tied up in it now, so it doesn't bother him as bad, but he really likes what we're doing now, and he can see the change in the soil and how much more time we have to do things and really pay attention to the things that matter, like planting and irrigating and stuff like that, not having to do a bunch of tillage and rush a crop in, when things are set up good. So he's all about it. And I, like I say, all our landlords are as well. And our yields hadn't dipped. So, I mean, we're still competitive with the area. So, I mean, we hadn't really given anybody a reason to complain as far as that goes. But I really think that even if we did have an off year like that, with the improvements we're making on the soil structure and just the, health of their farm, I think they'd probably give us a pass on a year or something like that if we had a catastrophe, something that had to do with cover crops. But we luckily haven't had that yet. So I guess that catches me up from when I got kicked out of here.
Yeah, I lost connection a while ago too. Maybe my connection's a little more reliable now. I'd like to make a comment if I could, Matt. I know when I saw the benefits that reducing tillage and using cover crop had on shrinking our environmental footprint to being more sustainable, then I started seeing, okay, here's some things we need to do. So I started trying to educate myself on this strategy. And And when it finally came on my radar screen about soil health, I found Adam and Robbie Beavis. There's some farmers in Arkansas that have been doing this a long time. And Adam, when I'd visit with you and you'd say, okay, well, as soon as I started doing cover crop, I didn't have to do deep tillage. Well, for a farmer that hadn't done this, and I know myself growing up on a farm and trying to learn this and understand this, because I can't sell it to somebody if I don't believe in it. But there are a lot of things that made my BS flag go right up the flagpole. It just does not sound right. And so I had to struggle with a lot, and it took me a while to learn that. But, and then I started smelling of that Kool-Aid a little more and more. But kind of some of y'all had your back up against the wall with different things. But how did y'all overcome these challenges? Because me as a researcher, I can do stuff on a farmer's field because he's going to give me 40 acres to play with and all that. If I make a bad mistake, well, it's not going to take him out of business and my paycheck's going to be the same. But Wes, Jesse, Adam, if y'all do something, especially in a big way, and it messes up your paycheck, you're going to be looking for a job in town. So how do you overcome those things?
I'm not froze up again. What order are we going in? Jesse, you going first again?
It doesn't matter. Adam, I want to hear your perspective on this. You definitely jumped out there whole hog a lot more than I have anyway.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really bothers my brother is I don't like doing 40 acres or something. If I can make it make sense in my head, and it's I don't know, it may look to some like a rash decision that I'm making, but it's I've been through the thought experiments for several months before I do something like that. But like cutting fertility out has been a big one for us. That's something that we, didn't necessarily ease into. We just 2016 decided to quit putting it out. We had some strips for a couple years previous to that, and we just were soil testing, doing grid samples, spending all this money on soil fertility, and weren't seeing any benefits from applying the P and K especially. And we still monitor our soil to see if it's dropping any, but it's not. And then but the reason we did it is just from all the questions I've had about soil testing, and why do I see X available nutrients in soil, and then when I take sap and tissue samples, I have plenty in the plant to make the whole crop. I mean, there's just so many questions around it. And my biggest problem with it is it didn't ever take into account, the biological aspect of the soil. So, when I put all those things together in my head, I just didn't see any reason to apply P and K anymore, at least not in synthetic form. I mean, we still use some gin trash and stuff like that on occasion, but you can't cover every acre with that stuff every year. So it's a rare event that we add any fertility at all. And that's one of the things that we just quit cold turkey after just a few small experiments. So, that kind of bothered my brother a little bit. He was worried, but we hadn't seen any reductions in anything yet. And our soil levels are still good. So, I've yet to find a soil scientist that can explain why that is. Why am I not mining my soils like I'm supposed to be? So that's one. And then, just jumping in there with cover crops as far as we did, the first year was 300 acres. That's all we could afford. I mean, I didn't have anything to lose the first year. It was either do something different and go broke, or do the same thing and go broke. So luckily it worked out I did something different, and it worked out for the best. But I don't know, the cattle thing, I just couldn't really afford to do any more than I've done. But if I had it my way, I'd have cows on 25% of the farm every year. But I just got to make it work in my head too. I don't know. I just I try to weigh it out and make an educated decision, but I like to do things bigger than just 40 acres. If I do 40 acres and it works great, and I'm just thinking, look at what I left on the table, I just have a hard time with that. Harder time with that than doing 1,000 acres and it blowing up on me. So I don't know. I'm just wired weird, I guess.
I think as a farmers in general are probably risk takers. I mean, by nature we have to be, and I guess that taking that risk doesn't scare us too much. And Bill, you said what happens if it messes up? You just got to have enough science and enough belief behind it to know it won't mess up when you try it. And, we jumped, I'm doing 40 acres, a little more drastically, but we've had a couple thousand acres cover crop the last 4 or 5 years. And really just because the falls have been so hard to get it in is limited. It would have been bigger numbers than that, really. So, it's just one of those things. You just take a blind leap of faith, I guess, in a lot of this stuff and hope it works.
Wes, you got any comments?
No, I mean, I just echo what those guys say. We haven't, I haven't branched out on anything new other than, we started, it was new to us, putting cover crops out, but I would like to try out, like I mentioned earlier, some blends, different species blends and see how that goes. But I'm not willing to jump out there and do all of my acres with a blend until I try it, on partials and see how it does for us.
Okay.
One
I
of the
like to comment. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was going to say one of the hardest things I had to grapple with on getting all those covers planted was taking somebody away from the harvest crew and prioritizing running a drill. That was one of the hardest things that I had to figure out how to do, because we got a drill running right behind the combine. Every day it's running, the drill's running. So for us to take somebody away from the harvest crew and put on a drill, that was a tough mental transition to make. Of course, we ended up making it work, but your whole focus that time of year is harvest, and it was just hard for us to take a man off of that and put him to planting cover crops. But
yeah, that's been our battle. I mean, that's the biggest battle, is have enough labor to do it all. And maybe you just realize, like y'all did, Adam, that you can just sacrifice a little bit of harvest capability to make sure you get your cover crop in.
That's what we did. We just saw the value in the cover, and it just outweighed the extra man on the harvest crew. So we just had to do a little bit more with a little bit less come harvest and make it happen. So, but that was a tough transition for us.
Well, that's part of one of the reasons why we plant ours the way we do is the labor issue. With that spreader we're running, I think we're spreading an 80-foot swath, and that's why I've been hesitant to put any blends in there, because of, if I have to narrow that swath, I'm increasing the amount of time that I'm having to dedicate to plant my cover. So that, the same thing with your labor issues. That's what limits the acres that we can plant, is having somebody that can actually plant while we're harvesting. Because if we can't I try to look at our covers, if I can't get it planted like I would plant a wheat crop for harvest the next summer, then I'm not going to plant it, because we planted it plenty. We planted it in December and wish we hadn't planted it because we wasted our seed. We didn't have anything come up. So, that's what limits our acres, is our labor and timeliness of getting the cover crop planted.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on Adam's comment on cutting out P and K. He said he couldn't find a soil scientist to explain it, and I think there's a reason. It's because we haven't studied this system that he's in. We've studied conventional systems, and so I'm thankful that these guys are doing some of this stuff. Adam and all these guys Wes and Jesse, are part of the Arkansas Soil Health Alliance, and they're pushing us as researchers and extension, to look at some of these different systems, and compare our conventional research to different systems. And I think it changes things. And so I'm just thankful that Adam always says yes to us university folks and helping us out, like with this broadcast like today, and Wes and Jesse. So thanks again, y'all. Bill, is there any more questions you've got in the box?
Well, one I wanted to bring out is, Adam, you've been doing this a while, and Jesse, you're fairly new to this, and Matt, you just talked about there's a lot of things as a university and extension. I know I really felt like as an extension specialist, I was really way behind the learning curve on this. And when I go to Adams and Robbie Beavis's and some of these folks that have, and the Taylors that have been doing this for 8, 10, 12 years, I go to learn. And I feel like I'm more able to help some of the other producers, but some of y'all that have been in this a while, where did you go to get your information? And then what do you see coming down the road? We talked before this thing aired, with with the carbon trading and some of the other things. How do you feel like that's a viable way to help broaden your revenue stream on the farm? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, so I got all my information off of YouTube and meetings in the Midwest and stuff like that. I mean, when I started, there was probably 3 or 4 people in the state that even knew anything about a cover crop. I remember my dad and grandpa when I was a kid growing vetch and Sudan grass on layout ground, stuff like that. But you know, no, there wasn't anybody planting cover crops here. Tim Smith helped me a little bit. He had done it in the 90s, but for the most part, I had to go, online to figure out what to do or anything, get any kind of ideas, and then I had to adapt them from wherever they were at to my situation, which wasn't always the easiest. I mean, what they do in Iowa and all that, I don't think you can do any wrong up there, but you take something they're doing up there and bring it down here, it's sometimes a pretty tough transition. But as far as the carbon credit deal, that's going to be what we make it. Like I said, there's plenty of companies that want to reduce their carbon footprint. And right now, the easiest way they see to do it is to offset their carbon output by buying credits from farmers. And, I've had mixed reviews on that from the critical side. It's a scapegoat for them to, keep up with their bad practices, but feel better about it. And, their consumers are driving that. So is it a really good long-term fix for carbon as an issue? I don't know. But as far as it being a revenue stream for farmers, the initial offerings I've seen are like $15 a ton, $20 a ton. Well, that's fine. But I've done quite a bit of research on this topic, and the actual value of a ton of carbon to these companies is about $140. And they're offering us 15 to 20. So, it's not much difference in the soybean market or the corn market. They're going to give us as little as we'll, demand, and they're going to get the maximum out of it. So we've got an opportunity here to really drive the value of a ton of carbon, being as we're the only ones that can sink carbon currently. So I'm hoping that, it doesn't get turned into just another soybean or another corn. I'm hoping that we can actually extract our fair share of the value out of it. I mean, if they're going to get all the benefits from their consumers and all that, then it ought to get passed down our way. And that generally does not happen for farmers. We usually take what price they give us and pay the prices they demand of us. And I'm thinking that's a bad model, but it's the one I'm in. So I'm hoping this carbon market is not that way. And it shouldn't be. We're in the driver's seat. We're the ones that are going to be selling them. So we ought to get a fair price for them, and how they measure them ought to be different regionally. I mean, you can't measure carbon impacts in Arkansas the same way you can in Minnesota. And so far, I'm not hearing a lot of that in that community. They're just wanting to look at it as a static number, something easy to test for. And that's not how carbon cycles work. So there's a lot of work to be done there too, before this thing really has legs and takes off. But yeah, it could be a very viable revenue stream for farmers. I mean, if we can get the value of carbon and get an accurate measurement tool, it could possibly be more profitable for a farmer landowner combination to farm carbon than it is an actual crop. It just depends on how all this gets structured and how the measurements are taken. So,
Jesse, Wes, let me jump in here while Adam's talking about soil carbon and all that. How long, he talked about a ton of carbon or whatever. How long do you think it would take to build a ton of carbon? Is that pretty quick, or is that a long term, or what do you think?
Well, down in the South, to actually build a static number of carbon is going to take a very long time, because our carbon levels cycle constantly. Our soils are alive 365 days a year. We can't stockpile carbon. When the plants slow down on photosynthesis in the winter, the soil microbes are still active, and they're actively chewing through whatever you surplused in the summertime And, you know, in the Midwest where everything's frozen, that doesn't happen. So they come out of an active growing cycle and go completely dormant, soils and all, and then they jump right back into another active growing cycle. So they can stack carbon up in their pool big in the, you know, in the frozen lands of the North, but down here we can't. But we can sequester more carbon on a yearly basis than they can. So it, you know, there's two sides of that coin, and it has to be looked at that way. It can't just be a static number.
Bill, and I also think, I mean, the carbon credits are, you know, definitely something that hopefully we get to capture. But on cotton, you know, we are a natural fiber. We're still battling petroleum basically and polyester. And I think using cover crops and proving cotton is sustainable in some of these practices, it may not increase the price of cotton, but it hopefully will increase the demand for cotton, and we'll get a lot of that market share back. So that's another reason why I find cover crops really interesting. I think we all have a good story to tell on farming, and this is even a better story to tell that I think a lot of the public would love to hear, and they just don't really have any way to hear it right now.
Matt, I've got another question, and it might be good to start with you because I know you've done a lot. You know, we've got 20 demos across the state where we're splitting fields, and not just cotton, but we got other commodities too. And I know you've taken a ton of samples, and nematodes have been some of your samples. But you know, Adam, Jesse, Wes, you know, when you look at the soil food web, you know, we got bacteria, fungi, protozoa. We got nematodes on there too, and there are a ton of nematodes out there. And you know, we always hear about the bad ones, but there are way more good ones than there are bad ones. But what are your thoughts? And Matt, I'd like you to go ahead and start. You know, what are you seeing? Are cover crops causing an issue with with nematodes, or they static quo or whatever? And then I'd like to hear what the farmers feel like that's contributing to other things in their farm.
Sure. So I guess first off, I'll give greenhouse experiments side of things, to where everything is conducive for a nematode to grow. Temperature, soil moisture, and that experience in a greenhouse shows that nearly any cover crop species that we've tested, I think they've done about 12 to 15 species, has the potential to drastically increase nematode, root knot nematode, southern root knot nematode populations. Now in the demos, we're taking soil samples, field scale, at cover crop termination in the spring, and then again at close to cast crop harvest. And we haven't seen any root knot nematode or parasitic nematode population increase significantly in our cover crop side. But what we have seen in some fields is beneficial nematodes or non-parasitic nematodes, free-living nematode populations increase in cover crop, in the cover crop side. And that's not the case in every field, but that's certainly the case in some fields. And so I think a big issue of that is possibly because you know, soil temperatures aren't warm enough for at that time of year for nematodes to really reproduce, is what I've gathered from talking to our nematologist. So I guess in short, not any major negative issues with cover crops and parasitic nematodes.
Yeah, we haven't noticed we haven't noticed an increase. Our first farm we put cover crop on is definitely our most sandiest and has nematodes somewhat. And you know, I don't know if it's decreased the number of nematodes out there, but I definitely don't think it's increased them. I haven't seen any, you know, new veins or anything showing up in the field that I didn't notice, you know, that weren't there 5 years ago.
Yeah, the cover crop themselves aren't going to increase or decrease population of nematodes. It's, you know, if you leave that soil alone and let things happen, then everything's going to balance out. It's just like the reduced insect sprays we see in cover crops. I mean, I see that every year, and it's because there's more predators. I mean, there's tons of things that eat nematodes. I've talked about this a lot in the last couple of talks I've done, and it's because I get this question all the time, and I've been doing a bunch of research on it. And the number of things that actually feed on parasitic nematodes is pretty astounding. And, you know, predator prey cycles, I've said it 1,000 times, they work the same everywhere. You got to have prey before you're going to get predators. And whenever we, you know, till our soils and all that, all we ever see is the parasites, the prey, because we don't ever have time to build a predator population. So, you know, maybe in your first year, you may see an increase, but if you leave that thing alone and let it do what it does, you're going to see less of them. You're going to see more nematodes overall, but the majority of them are going to be, you know, like Matt said, free living. And, you know, our nematode issues, we used to have spots in the fields that we could visually see. We don't have those anymore. They're gone. It's not because we did any telome or any special seed treatment. We actually don't use any of that stuff for nematodes. It just, nature just has a way of working. You know, we think we got it all figured out, but you go over in the forest just right next to your field, and that's how it's really supposed to work. It's not supposed to work the way we're doing it, but we can make them work together and be a lot better off.
Adam, you know, you talked about not using P&K. You got fields that what, 8-10 years you hadn't used P&K, is that right?
Yeah, I've got a couple that I started in 14, but the majority's 16. So what's that? Before this would be the fifth, sixth year?
Yeah, 6th year.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find that some of the cover crops you use maybe do a better job of helping provide P&K to your cash crop?
You know, I've seen a lot of literature on that about different ones bringing up different levels of nutrients, and that very well may be. I haven't actually done any of that work myself on the place, but I think if you have an active soil, you know, lots of things mining different nutrients or mineralizing, cycling, whatever you want to call it, you know, that's the key. As far as which one does what, I don't know. I've heard, you know, sunflowers are good for zinc, and I've heard, you know, buckwheat's good for calcium and this and that. I really don't know that myself. I just try to be diverse and try to keep something living, and it's worked itself out so far.
Do you have a thought on that, Matt? Because I know you looked at several different cover crops, and some release nutrients really quick and some don't. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, I'd second what Adam said. I don't know if there's a ton of work out there on looking at, you know, if a certain plant, you know, exudes root exudates that make nutrients more available in the soil to your cash crop or not. I think the biggest issue, or the biggest thing, not issue, but the biggest benefit cover crops provide in this aspect of P&K is, like Adam talked about, increasing biology. But in a greater sense, I think even increasing the cash crop rooting depth. We've got, in our demos, we have soil moisture sensors at 6, 12, 18, and 30 inches deep. And so we can look at moisture, you know, if it's hitting those sensors at different depths, and even if the cash crop's using moisture at those depths. And so what we're seeing is when we have a cover crop, moisture is going down deeper in the profile, and then the cash crop is using moisture deeper in the profile. But where we don't have a cover, our cash crop isn't always using moisture deep down, and it's kind of limiting our cash crop rooting depth where it takes up moisture to a 6 or 12 inch depth. And so we know most nutrients are taken up by the plant in water. And so if the plant's not taking up water at 12 or 18 inches, then it's not taking up nutrients. So I think with cover crops, I kind of liken it to a 4-cylinder versus a V8. We're in our cover crops, our cash crop has a V8 engine to you know, take up those nutrients, where in a non-cover, we're kind of limiting that engine power to take up nutrients.
So with that bigger engine, can we use less nitrogen because we triple or quadruple our effective rooting zone?
Possibly. That's what Dr. Green at ASU is showing, is you can definitely reduce some nitrogen.
You know, Adam, you've looked at a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we've been in that study with Dr. Green, and since the inception of that study, we've taken just say corn, for example, our units of nitrogen that we used for corn was 220. Now it's at 165. And that's just because that's what he's shown our that's where the law of diminishing returns kicks in. We don't actually increase yield anything over 165 units of N. So that's where we stop. I don't know if that's, I think it's because of a more biologically active soil and a lot bigger rooting zone myself, but you know, I don't know if he's pinpointed why it is. I kind of doubt it. I mean, we just know that's what it is. It's dropped from 220 to 165 is where we are on our farm for corn. Cotton, you know, we had 60 units year before last, and that was more than enough because we were fighting growth till the end of the year. So I don't know that we ought not drop that back some this year. But yeah, we've reduced nitrogen use a lot.
I mean, just to put into context on conventional tillage right now, we're doing 90 units on cotton and 250 to 275 on corn. So that kind of gives everybody an idea of the savings Adam's had since he switched.
The last few years that hadn't amounted to a whole lot of dollars, but looking at prices right now, that's going to be a chunk, unfortunately.
Yep.
Wes, are your fertilizer applications pretty similar across cover and no cover fields?
They are, you know, I'm not sure probably how long the cover crop's been on a particular field will have some bearing on, especially on nitrogen. You know, there's been places where we, and I'm thinking rainfall amounts. I mean, it's a dynamic system, but
Sure.
In fields where you might just have started cover crop, I'm not sure that you can cut your nitrogen rate there. We've done it and we've seen the yield loss by doing it. So, you know, once you get the system going, you know, down the road, you might can limit that or stay the same as what you're in your non-cover crop fields. But, you know, we haven't changed our fertility program up that much.
Yeah, I'd second that. And we've seen some issues in corn and rice, possibly needing some pre-plant stuff out, at least in the first year of cover crop use. Now, when you get your system going, like Adam has over 3 or 4, 6 years, you know, maybe we'll see something different. But in some of the demos we've seen a little bit of yield drag. So, Bill, any more questions?
Yeah, well, I just want to make a comment. You know, you talked about, you know, yield drag and some of these things in here, and you know, I think the title of our session today is it profitable? And I know, Adam, you know, I worked with you on your farm, and I've seen just the tremendous savings that you made on your out of pocket, and you've done it across a lot of different areas. And then, but working with Wes and your father-in-law before he retired, typically the amount we spent was really about the same, sometimes even a little more an acre, but we made more yield. So what do you think drives you into this, and what do you think is going to take to keep you in this? Or you know, thinking about maybe your neighbors wanting to get into this, what's it going to take, and what can we do to help them?
I think we got to document that it's going to save you money. I think that's, you know, right now that's what farmers are looking. They definitely don't want to hear, well, cover crop is going to cost $20 to $25 an acre to put out. You know, you hopefully will save a little bit on insecticide. Hopefully you'll save a little bit on water. You hopefully will get a little bit of yield. But what you need to prove is kind of what Adam's doing. And you start cutting out some cost, I think that'll really, and still holding your yield, that's what'll really, you know, increase participation and make people really look at this cover crop.
So it doesn't have to increase yield?
No, I don't believe so. I think as long as it can be competitive with conventional tillage, I think that's all we would landowners and producers alike would be fine.
Yeah, I think so. I think as long as you're competitive for your area, then, you know, I mean, you got to make a profit. I mean, you can't just out yield people just, you know, to try to do it. You know, if you're putting yourself in a negative position, just trying to out yield your neighbor, that's just silly. You know, but you do have to, stay competitive to keep your ground. I mean, if you're making, 75% of everybody else, and that's not going to be sustainable long-term either if you're a renter like I am. So, there's a balance there. You gotta make a profit, but you don't have to out yield everybody every year. I mean, I rarely do. But again, we're competitive and we're able to make a profit and a living. And that's, a landowner's got to see that from your side as well. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some out there that don't, but all mine do. They expect me to make a living and be competitive. So that's what we try to do. But yeah, if you can show significant savings in inputs and, even with the high prices that we're climbing prices, I don't know how long they're going to last. I read different stuff every day, but, inputs have climbed right with them. So are we really better off right now than we were 3 months ago? Probably not from a net standpoint. So, we're playing the same game we were this time last spring, just with bigger numbers. So, yield is an important number, but it's not the most important number, I guess, is the point of all that rambling.
Well, on the farmer side, your neighbors buying into it. Their old habits are hard to break from what I can see. And the old mentality is you don't want anything in that field except what your cash crop is. And that mentality is kind of a hard one to get over, especially my part of the world over here. And then you got on top of that the industry where they're telling you that you don't want anything in your field except what that crop is. And they're selling, herbicides and all these other things. So, they're in a position to make money off the farmer, just like, all the other places that we buy stuff from. And, that's going to be the hard sell, I think, for the other growers that aren't. They've got to make a conscious decision to look into it and see that there can be benefits for them and then go from there.
Guys, I came to Arkansas in 95, and I remember when I came here, I was in, my first extension specialist job, and I was visiting with a farmer that had several years experience growing cotton. But he said, Bill, young man, I don't grow cotton to kill boll weevil. I grow cotton to make money. But, when we look at this and we look at reducing costs, I've seen, Adam, from our budget, you've reduced your out-of-pocket 40% in some of our university fields. Your out-of-pocket's reduced 35%. Okay. Can we, I've visited with a lot of farmers that, labor is their number one issue. And I've heard so many farmers say they wish they could get to a size where they could grow they could make a living without having to have a lot of extra help. Okay. Is this going to be one way to do it? Are we going to need to be bigger? We're going to need to be smaller. What do you see the size of the farm and how this fits in with our labor issues and all that down the road? And can the landlords help? Do you think they'd help on this?
I don't know about landlord helping, but that was our strategy prior to cover crops, was get bigger. I mean, we ramped up to just a little over 10,000 acres. We gathered up all we could, and it didn't do anything but make our lives more difficult. It didn't change anything in the long run. Our margin was still razor thin, and if we were lucky to make any money at all. If you can, what I've seen is you can do more acres with less stuff with this cover crop and no-till. I mean, it just makes sense, right? If you're not having to run a bunch of tillage passes and all that, you don't need as many men on the farm doing that. But ideally, if you could, integrate animals and diversify, then you could make a living on a significantly smaller farm than even what I've got, at 7,800 acres. And long term, that would be a goal of mine. But yeah, I mean, I would think a couple thousand acres, a man could make a really nice living if he could start, or she could start, with a diverse crop mix with animals and the whole 9 yards. I don't see why anybody would need to farm big like farmers are farming now, myself included. I mean, I think it's unnecessary, knowing what I know now. But and that's from a renter's perspective. I don't own enough to be called a landowner, so I don't consider myself in that group at all. We rent almost everything. So even paying rent, I think you can make a decent living on smaller acres with this system.
Yeah, and on the landowner side, like I said, we've actually had a few that volunteered to cost share, their crop share portion of the cover crop to encourage, using it and making their soil better. So I think there is some that would definitely be interested in that. I don't think it's something you push, but there's a lot of landowners that are still actively involved in the farm, and they want their farm to be good farms, and they want to do good for the environment, and that helps when you can get them to buy in and help you.
Yep.
Well, Adam, I guess with some of the things you're doing, reducing expenses here and reducing expenses there, you make a lot of friends with the salesman, don't you?
Yeah, not really. Not really. Yeah, I don't have near the free hats I used to get. But early on, I would have them ask me if I'm buying somewhere else, or, they just couldn't accept the fact that I wasn't buying as much. That just didn't make sense to them. They thought I was just buying from a competitor or something like that. But most of them now just kind of, they're just indifferent towards me. If I call and ask for something, they know I'm shopping around, so they either give me their best price or they don't. And, it's all business at the end of the day. I've got places that I like doing business with better than others, but at the end of the day, my profit margin is my profit margin and not theirs. So I've got to do what I got to do on my place to get that. So yeah, it's not the best way to make friends that are salesmen, but luckily most of them are used to it now. I've already gone through all that.
Well, I've got a question. We've kind of danced around it, but cover crops, you look at it, you can reduce all these inputs potentially, and you can, you look at potential nutrient deficiencies in the crop that you may not even see it when you have a cover crop, just because we're improving the system, improving soil structure and water infiltration. But how is implementing this system, no-till and cover crops, impacted your bottom line? Has it been a 10% increase in profitability? Just kind of a rough estimate there on each of your fields that you've implemented these practices. Can you even put a number to it?
Well, for me, and I'll bring up that other field, it's going to be field by field specific too, but we went on a dry land farm. We went from, on a good year, on a dry year, averaging 10 or 12 bushels of soybeans in the harvest. And by implementing cover crop into that farm, we bumped our consistently average yield to about 40 bushels of soybeans. So, that's, you can make money at today's prices on 40 bushel soybeans, whereas at 10 bushel soybeans, you're losing quite a bit of money. So, again, it's going to be a field by field case, I think, too.
Sure.
Yeah, and it varies year by year too. This past year we got planted late and September didn't cooperate, and I didn't make much money at all, if any. But if I'd have been on the same system I'd have been, 10 years ago, I'd probably be looking for a job, because that would have been devastating. So I can tell you this, I'm making the same crops with about 50% of the budget that I was 10 years ago. And you can adjust that for the year, each year. It's 50% on an equivalent year. So we just don't need near the money that we were needing to do the same thing prior to this system.
Yeah, the first farm we started with cover crop on was a half-mile pivot, real sandy soils. We were picking 900-pound cotton on this block before, fighting pigweed, and now it's consistently making 12 to 13.50. Our cost right now, we haven't cut anything out, is about the same as our conventional till, but we have increased yield on that farm anyway. And we're going to start playing around with some of the input costs to see if we can drop that side down. But that's a couple 100-pound increase. And most of that was because of moisture management. It was sandy and that pivot couldn't keep up. And that's where that increase came from, I think, anyway.
Sure. Well, guys, I think we'll start wrapping it up. Do y'all have any more questions for each other or for Bill or I?
No, thanks for having me. It was a good talk.
Yep,
Yeah,
same here.
We appreciate y'all. Y'all are always saying yes to us. We probably bugged the snot out of you throughout the year, and I know Bill's thankful. I'm certainly thankful for y'all's participation. Y'all make our jobs a little more enjoyable. This would be difficult without you, that's for sure. So, David, you wanna take over and say a few words?
Yeah, I want to start sharing my screen here, but I guess there you go, David. You think I had done this once or twice? One thing I thought that was great discussion. I failed to recognize the effort behind the soil health movement there in Arkansas to begin with. I think one of you brought it up with the Soil Health Alliance, Arkansas Soil Health Alliance. And folks, that's unique. You can't go to all 50 states and across the country and that's happening. Even there are a number of other states it is. So I really want to applaud you all for being ahead of the game there. You may not recognize that, or maybe that's a little uncomfortable to be ahead of the game, but that is something that's unique, and I appreciate that. So I appreciate all three of the producers opening up and being willing to share their information with us. I want to put a plug in for next Tuesday. We're going to have a group of folks from California going to be talking about improving soil health in a dry climate. And I could almost put a regulatory climate on there too, because California brings some things that you don't have to deal with necessarily there in Arkansas group, but they do have to handle that a little more. So I appreciate you all want to come back. I want to remind you, if you registered for once, you'll get notification about all of these. Again, you also get notification about the replays as they become available. Here's the future one after the dry climate one. We'll have cotton, the group from Georgia talking about cotton and peanuts in rotation and how you deal with soil health. Then finally, we'll have a cotton producer we have in North Carolina who also runs the cotton gin. Kind of gives a little bit of perspective from that angle. Then on the 16th of March, we're going to have a group from South Carolina talk about 8 years. They've been involved with this 8 years of regenerative ag, talking the same thing. And Adam, Sonny Price has found the same thing you have about fertilizer. He's just, and it's really it almost takes your breath away when you hear someone say they quit using fertilizer because we've been used to it. So I'm sure there was a few gasps out there. I'm sure of that. And then we're going to conclude the session with we're going to have 3 representatives from the cotton industry talk about the importance of soil health and to the future of cotton here in the United States. And again, with that, I want to say thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate your help. Matt and Bill, you did a great job. And we'll conclude today's showcase with that. Thank you.